Hey everybody, welcome back to another Science Sunday. This week we're talking about Jesus healing a blind man in the city of Bethsaida, in the village. So here's the story. It's in Mark chapter 8, verse 22. Jesus and his followers came to Bethsaida. Some people brought him a blind man and begged Jesus to touch the man. So Jesus took the man out of the village. Then he spit on the man's eyes. He put his hands on the blind man and asked, "Can you see now?" The blind man looked up and said, "Yes, I see people, but they look like trees walking around." Again, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then the man opened his eyes wide. His eyes were healed, and he was able to see everything clearly. Jesus told him to go home, saying, "Don't go into the town." Now, there's a couple of points we can get from this. So the first thing is that Jesus has the power to heal a blind man. That in and of itself is amazing. The other thing that we see is that he didn't do it all at once. So sometimes when we need help, or there are things in our lives that we need or that we ask Jesus to do for us, sometimes he doesn't do it all the way, or maybe he doesn't even solve the problem for us, but he might help us along the way. So you got to realize that just because Jesus doesn't answer your prayers doesn't mean that he's not there to help you. All right, so what I thought about in this passage was vision, and how important it is for us to be able to see things, and how when Jesus gave this man his sight back, he really changed his life. He changed him from someone who was dependent on everyone else around him to someone who could be independent and could basically do everything that you need to do. And especially back then, there wasn't the type of support and assistance that you have for people who have disabilities today. It was much more detrimental if you had disability and you were blind back in these days. All right, so let's talk about sight. What is sight? We see with our eyes, and we take for granted that we're able to sense the world around us with this ability, but what is it actually doing? So what's happening is light bounces off of objects and then enters our eyes and hits nerve endings on the back of our eyes, and that is interpreted by our brain to tell us what colors are and how far things are away, and that's what vision is. So we're going to do a couple of experiments to show how interesting the concept of light and of how we sense the light on hitting surfaces is. The first really interesting thing is to think about your eyes. They are lenses. Basically, they take light in a very wide field and they narrow it down to a very small space on the back of your eyeball to be able to sense everything. And what we're going to do a neat experiment to show you how a lens works. So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to draw a nice little arrow. Okay. All right, so here's our little arrow. And this is a really interesting concept of how lenses work. And you can see that our arrow is pointing this way. Now look what happens when we put it behind a lens. Now this is just a container of water. You can do this experiment at home. Look what happens. Noelle, can you get a good view of that?
Here, I got that.
All right, so you see it's pointing to the left, and then when I put it behind this homemade lens, it's pointing to the right. You see it clearly in there? So that is a really interesting observation, but how do you explain it? Why is it doing that? Let's go over here to the whiteboard and I'll draw really quickly. So in your eyeball, you basically have the lens, which is in the front of your eye, and it gathers all this light coming from the world, and it directs it to this very small cluster of nerve endings. And that's how a lens works. Now what's happening with our lens that we created over there, it's taking a picture of the arrow pointing one direction, and it's gathering all that light, and it's hitting this lens, but there's a very interesting effect. The light on this side hits here, and it actually reflects over here. And the light from this side comes in and reflects over here. So the lens is reversing the light as a process of how the lens works. And so in our eyeball, that light ends up hitting right here. But with our glass, because of where we place this sign and where the camera is, here's the camera. Sorry, I'm really bad at drawing. Here's the camera. Instead of it being focused on a smaller point, it's actually crossing and reversing the image. So the image, from the camera's perspective, looks like it's pointing the other direction. Isn't that neat?
Whoa.
That's pretty good. All right, let's take a look at something else that we can do. Now we want to talk about light and what it is, and we talk about how it crosses directions inside the lens, but you can actually see how light works if you are able to focus light. So if you guys ever played with a laser pointer, Noelle, you're gonna want to come in closer for this one. This is just a laser diode, and what it does is it emits light in a straight line. So usually a light bulb or the sun will scatter light everywhere. This will shine it in one very uniform straight path for a bunch of lights. And you can't really see it. You can see, the effect of it bouncing off my hand, but you can't see the light being emitted unless you shine it through something like this, which is opaque. So this is just a little bit of cornstarch inside this container. Now when I put my light that you can't see because it's just going through the air, when you pass it through something that's semi-opaque, you can see the beam.
Whoa.
And so this just shows you how light works. So, this again is a directed beam of light. All of the waves of light are going in the same direction. And so we're able to see this. And you can kind of see this, there's this really neat effect. Let me actually turn this light off so we can see this better. So you can actually see this better.
Whoa, that looks like.
It's like a laser.
It's like a lightsaber.
It looks like a lightsaber. That's what I was gonna say. The red ones.
Now, there's a couple of other really interesting properties of this. So the first is you can see this light over here. It's shining on the ground. Here, we'll actually put a paper here. Now look what happens when I get to the point where I'm hitting the water.
That's so cool.
Oh,
It
wow.
hits the
It
glass and then
bounces
bounces
off the-
back.
It bounces off the glass. Isn't that crazy? So you can see the point here, but as soon as you go under, it changes. And that just has to do with how light travels through different mediums. Mediums means like the space around you. So here it's just traveling through air. And then here it's traveling through the water with the cornstarch. And so it's going to have different properties of reflection and refraction. And so that's why it actually hits the glass and bounces off this way. So it behaves differently. And another really interesting thing, which is a little harder to show, but the beam angle changes once you hit the water. So what that really means is if I'm able to do this the right way, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it, but this beam goes straight, but then when it hits the water, it actually changes direction. And that again is because the light is going to take the shortest path through a given medium, and once it hits the water, it has different properties for propagating light. So, yeah, that's a little more advanced. But one other really advanced thing about light that you might read about or be interested in is it acts as two different things. So one, it acts like a wave, just like radio waves or sound waves or anything else. And for a long time, scientists thought, oh, it's just a wave. But it also acts like a particle, like an individual piece of matter. So, something that you shoot out of a gun. And so you can think of this as shooting out protons and, shooting out, not protons, photons, shooting out a bunch of energy to this other thing, and it travels in as if it has mass. But what's crazy about light is it does both of those things. It acts like a wave and it acts like a particle. So that's something that scientists today are still trying to figure out. There was one other thing that I wanted to mention, but I'm forgetting. Oh, right, the speed of light. So how fast light travels is constant in the universe. And sometimes that seems a little weird, because in certain circumstances, it seems like light can travel further than its speed tells you it can. So what's actually happening is the light is still traveling at a constant speed, but time is not constant. So time is actually speeding up or slowing down to accommodate light traveling the same speed. That's really advanced topic. It's in general, and it's in the theory of relativity, but it's incredible if you read up on that and how that works. All right, that's it for science this week. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys next week.